Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar, Paper to Platform, Digitizing Permits, Payments, and Public Engagement. Before we start, we'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered virtually across many traditional, treaty, and unceded territories of Indigenous people throughout North America. We honor the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in Canada, and the Native nations and tribes across the United States, who have cared for these lands since the immemorial and continue to do so today. My name is Meredith Millman. It is my pleasure to act as your host today. I would like to introduce our panelists. So from Worldline, we have Carlos Guzman, fraud analyst, and Kevin Saliba, integration specialist, both with Worldline. And then from GHD, Daniel Shaw, Senior Business Solutions Consultant, and Michael Pinnau, Product Manager. So my goal today is to facilitate a conversation between these fine people. And if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll get us started. So at a macro level, what is driving the urgency with municipalities to focus on digital transformation? I'm going to pass it over to Michael and Daniel to start us off.
Awesome. So I'll kick us off with, I think, one of the biggest driving factors, and that's just where technology is going overall. Everybody is used to that Amazon and Shopify experience of immediate service delivery. You can buy things online. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't even have to go to a store to buy something. And that experience is becoming the de facto expectation in all industries. So it's no longer something that's nice to have. It's viewed as kind of like a necessity by people. And then there's also internal pressures that drive this. So there's kind of budgetary and operational efficiencies that come with delivering services online. It's a lot cheaper to deliver a service online. So if you can offer that and serve as many or more people online, it's more efficient, it costs the municipality less, and it lets municipal clerks and staff focus on delivering other services and other needs internally. So it kind of frees them up for other initiatives. And then go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, no, I was actually just going to build on that, just that last point you made there about budgets, right? So, I mean, what we hear it, and I think it's true, municipalities and public sectors asking to do more with less, right? So I think that's pretty common. And when we're talking, this webinar is called Paper to Platform. So when you're talking about kind of a paper-based solution, that's, I'm not going to say impossible, but almost impossible or very, very difficult to scale as you're asked to do more, as populations grow. Like most communities that are seeing their population grow. Well, how do you scale out those services if you're still doing it what we'll say is old school ways with paper or trips into city hall or town hall? It's really hard to grow that service without, hiring more people, which can also be difficult to do, right? So if you can take advantage of the technologies that are out there, so I'll throw some examples, so maybe registering for a program, applying for a permit, any type of payments online. Obviously, we've got our partners here from Worldline that are helping to facilitate that. But once you bring that online, that does allow you to scale and allow you to do more than with less. Yeah, I think it's kind of the only way to build it up.
Yeah, and just to add to that is as you scale and people go online more and more, cybersecurity becomes kind of a key component in this because you have to mitigate the risk of having online transactions. As you move more and more service delivery online, you need to make sure you have a solid partner for that.
Just want to add, in addition to that, Michael, there are things like modernization mandates where they need to replace those legacy systems and improve accessibility, governance, and even auditability of that whole flow end to end.
Yeah, and just you've already said it there, Michael. But this is an expectation now, right? Like it's no longer just a nice to have. As more younger people are coming online and buying houses or whatever they're doing in each of these communities, they've now got that expectation to be able to do all of this online. That's probably really, quite honestly, all they know at this point. So just to continue to build that relationship with your residents or visitors, or whoever's using this, bringing online it's kind of it's something that's essential now. And I think we're going to get a little bit into what are some of those challenges and why are people not doing it. But I think we're at a point now where it really, if you're not already doing it, or you're just kind of dipping your toes into giving these services online, it's time to kind of go all in. And I think we're going to cover some of those challenges with that.
Awesome. Thank you. So we just talked about it there from the macro level in terms of, it's citizens' expectations, regulatory and compliance, cybersecurity, and budgets, right? Governments are being asked to do more with less. So then flipping it on the micro level, so looking at the day-to-day of residents and staffs, what does the current fragmented service delivery look like?
Yeah, I'll walk through it at a resident level. So for residents, there could be a disconnect. Like if they have to go into City Hall, that's a barrier to accessing a service and acting within compliance, right? Because, if things get too hard, sometimes people don't do them, even if that's right or wrong, unfortunately. And then I think another challenge that comes up is, if you have too many spots where a resident has to look for information to go to a service, or if it's hard to actually find the information or understand it and then follow the rules, you can basically face attrition on compliance with laws. So it's really important to make it easy for the resident to be able to find services. I'm going to pass it over to Daniel to talk about how this affects people at the government.
Yeah, I'm actually just going to add one other point from a resident standpoint, because we're all kind of working in government, but also residents of our respective cities. So you use the word compliance there, Michael, and I think a good example would be like, you want people to be following the rules, and there's reasons that those rules are in place, right? So bylaws, whatever it might be. So if we take an example I like to use is like a burn permit, right? So if you're in a community that has to issue burn permits, you expect your residents to apply for those. The reality is, if we make it difficult, they're probably just not going to do it, right? So if I need to apply for a burn permit, whether I need to pay for it or whether it's no charge, if I can go online and just do it, I'm just gonna go and do it, right? It's easy to click on the link, fill out the fields, what am I burning, when am I burning it, and submit it, right? Maybe I pay, maybe you don't have to. But if it's okay, if to do that, I now need to go into a city hall or town hall, and I need to apply. I need to get it, reviewed, and all that is a more traditional like paper process. I wouldn't, but somebody might just go ahead and do it without kind of going through the proper channels, right? So I think it's, if you want that compliance, and building permit, probably the same experience, and certain other things, right? So yeah, the compliance wouldn't apply as much to like registering for programs and things like that, but those bylaw type things and enforcement type things, you definitely want to have it. Your question there, Michael, back to me, was like from the public servant standpoint. So fragmented basically means, for me, if I was to describe it, like, where is that information living? Who owns that information? So when I talk about this with clients, I always frame it up as a win-win. It's a win for the resident, right? We already talked about expectations. A resident doesn't want to print up a PDF and fill it out and try to figure out how to get it back to you with a scan or an email or dropping it off, right? So that's doing all these different services online is a win for them. And then for the municipality or for the public sector, it's a win because now you've brought all that information, you've centralized it, you've digitized it, right? So when we use the term fragmented, so that could mean somebody, if it's a paper-based system and somebody has applied for that burn permit, we'll give that same example. It's being emailed to such and such as a scan. It's being dropped off and it's sitting on somebody's desk. Somebody filled printed it up and took a picture of it and did it that way, right? So now you've got all this information in all these different places. Nobody really knows where it is or where it lives. So you're, first off, that's going to be very inconvenient for the municipality. Secondly, it's going to kind of just really make it impossible to keep to keep track of all that, right? And then I guess the third part, and this is kind of goes to that payment piece is, you know, how are they paying for it? Do you have some kind of a centralized payment system, right? Where if it is fragmented and some people are paying online and some people are paying in the you know, on site, where are those funds going? How are you reconciling it? So yeah, when you kind of get that nice consistent solution that everybody's using, it just gets kind of everybody rowing in the same direction, we'll say.
That sounds like a perfect segue to me to toss it over to Kevin to talk about the consequences of disconnected payments, right, for staff and citizens. And I don't know, Kevin, if you can dive into like why is there such a gap and in terms of the problems that can come from it.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you, Meredith. And Daniel, exactly, just to add on to what you're saying, that disconnected payments for staff anyways, it can be a pain point for the municipalities when they're trying to reconcile their payments between online and offline sources. There's an inability to set up and control, you know, recurring payments and things like that when they're dealing only with online or paper payments. Again, difficulty with the actual reporting, conducting audits across all these different services. So those are some of the consequences of those disconnected payments. And I think some of the reasons those gaps persist today is they just think that there's just too much effort required or too much money required, or that there's just, it's just too strict of a regulatory or compliance or data control requirement that's being made of them. So those are some of the reasons why it's a persistent gap. For citizens, for residents, it's a pain point for sure when they're trying to pay for the government services because they're not able to, you know, see an overview of their payment history, their future payment schedules for things like that. You know, not having these days, anyways, not having a mobile app. A lot of citizens are used to paying for government services in person, especially if they've been doing this for decades. Trends are showing, you know, mobile app usage just exploding across younger demographics. They expect there to be a mobile app these days. However, some clients are slow to adopt to those just due to those above reasons. So there's, and on top of that, there's also for citizens, there's that concern about still privacy and fraud when they go online with these payments and process outside of their normal, say, in-person or paper methods.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons it can also be disconnected, I feel like, is I think people sometimes, like, you know, have a long career in government and technology changes really rapidly. So what we're able to do now versus what might have been available 5 or 10 years ago is vastly different. Like, it's much quicker to build forms than it ever has been. Payment integrations are smoother than they've ever been. There's lots of services out there to do it. Worldline, great example, right? And I feel like the time is kind of now, and you should just hop on the bandwagon because it has gotten a lot easier to take a paper form and just build it into a web form that's, you know, mobile friendly and accessible for everybody.
And curiously, Michael, on your end, do you have any examples of trends that you're seeing within the municipalities of fraud specifically that you're seeing?
Yeah, so in the industry, I have seen examples of fraudsters actually using government forms to verify credit card details online. And because it's a transaction with a government agency, most banks don't actually flag that as an issue because they're like, well, it's a government. Like, why would they transact? You know what I mean? It doesn't look suspicious at all, right? Even if it's a low cost item like garbage bag tags. So it's really important when you're setting up your services to have the right people in place that are looking out for you to prevent this from happening, and then design your forms and workflows so that that's difficult to do.
I think this is a perfect time to bring in Carlos. So speaking of fraud, Carlos, and just in terms of that example that Michael mentioned, you know, we know that municipalities are increasingly targeted with fraud. You know, can you touch a little bit on, you know, why this is happening and what some of those concerns are?
Yeah, of course. I think the main drive for municipalities to change to digitalized forms or payments is provide solutions to the new and more sophisticated cyber threats that are around, fraud schemes, etc. Fraud prevention is a key component of modern payments. There are multiple threats. They have from account takeover, refund scams, friendly fraud, and credential stuffing that is kind of similar to what Michael was mentioning. It's basically testing some cards. I just will touch briefly in a couple of them. The friendly fraud is basically one of the ones I wanted to touch on is when a customer falsely dispute a transaction with the bank. They basically forget that they do that transaction and then they go ahead and dispute it. So this represents about 16% of the total file disputes with the credit card brands, and 22% of the customers in 2022 admitted that they were making a false chargeback claim. This fraud is costly on time and resources to resolve the dispute and clarify the charges. And the main one that it was referred to, the anecdote that Michael referred to, is credential stuffing, or we call it carding. It's basically when they use the platform to test stolen credit cards. You can see it as small charges in the account, and then multiple declines of the cards. They could be thousands of transactions. It costs them fees and time to resolve it. It's very clear. So if you see any of these trends, we will be happy to help you with some questions or resolve them.
Thank you. Okay, so we've talked about the pains, we've talked about the problems, we've talked about the driving urgency. So we're now saying, okay, so I've got this, I am the municipality, I want to do this, I want to start or continue evolving in terms of moving from paper to platform. You know, from the residents' point of view, what should the municipality prioritize when modernizing services? I think I'm going to pass this one to Michael and Daniel to start.
Awesome. So I'll kick it off. We've already touched on it a few times, but if you're going to offer a service online, make sure that, you know, it has a mobile first design. You know, should work well on desktop, but it needs to work well on mobile phones, scale down, be legible, things like that. Just so many users are using their phones or their iPads now that you've got to make sure you cover all those different devices so that they can access and fully leverage the online services that you've put effort into delivering. Another one is user-centric design. So focus on making sure that when you're building out these forms, the resident knows like what information they're putting in, why they're putting it in. You can also sometimes measure things like the data privacy laws that's stored locally and things like that, just in case that there's hesitancy or kind of trust issues where they maybe don't trust online yet. Easing them, kind of saying like, we have all these procedures in place actually protecting your data, it's safe to use, can sometimes make it lower the barrier for someone adopting an online service. And then finally, I'll touch on accessibility. So this isn't just WCAG compliance, it's also just making sure your form is really easy for everyone to use. So, you know, design with accessibility in mind so that it's easy to use the form, and the form can be used by all sorts of different users regardless of their ability.
Yeah, and I'm gonna maybe just build quickly on that usability piece as well, Michael, right? Because a lot of the times when you're well, we're talking about municipalities. We know we've got lots of other public sector users, healthcare, police services, fire services, etc. Trust is very, very important, right? So obviously, when we think about trust when presenting those online services, I typically go right to security, right? Like, is it secure? But it's also just about that whole user experience, right? Like, was it easy to use? Does this feel right? Am I going to come back again and try to do this again with something else, right? Like, you kind of only get a couple chances to do things right. So just from a user standpoint, just make sure it's going to be very, very simple and straightforward to use. And then just something else with that trust is just does that person creating as part of that transaction feel like something actually happened, right? So Mike and I were actually talking earlier today about this. Is like when somebody goes and hands a piece of paper off at City Hall, they've got this sense of security, right? They've got that now. So this transaction is happening, and I feel like something's going to get done because I actually handed it to somebody, and now they're gonna send it down the line, right? Some could argue maybe that's even less likely, right? Because who's destined to end up. We already talked about, like, you've got these information different places. But when you're bringing that online, there's lots of ways you can leverage the technology to make sure that you're building that trust, right? So it could be as just as simple as notifications, right? Like when somebody pays for something, they're going to get notified, right? It's going to, this is obviously the information coming from Worldline, right? So what was the transaction number? How much was the transaction for? What was the date and all those types of things, right? So make sure they've got that information. Things like status. So that kind of takes it out of the payment piece, but just status. What's the status of this transaction? If it's a permit or something and there's a workflow, keep people updated so that they feel really good that that this is actually happening. So again, I think with younger families and younger users, they're going to be a little bit more comfortable doing those types of things and just kind of assuming that it's being done. Where there might be some other users that are like, no, I still want to be able to hand that off to the certain person that I know because I know they're going to take it and they'll get it done. So just making sure that entire transaction is happening is easy to use. You're keeping the person up to date, and I mean, mobile first design. I think that goes with it. At the something definitely needs to happen. That's kind of the main things I would try to prioritize is just communicate.
I just want to touch on that quick. Something I want to say is like you can also set expectations when you communicate, right? So if you have to take time to review something internally, just put a disclaimer on, hey, it might take us 1 to 2 days or even up to a week before you're going to hear back from us. And that way, when a user submits something online, they're like, okay, I should hear from it in about a week. Maybe I'll get my permit in about a week's time. That's awesome, because then they don't kind of stress thinking every day because, Amazon ships things to them the next day, right? So you're always competing with that expectation. So even if it takes you a little longer, if you communicate with the user, you can help to build more of that trust, which Daniel was talking about, which I think is vital to offering the services online.
Yeah, and you just made me think of an example there, Michael. And we kind of started this whole conversation about the Amazon of the world, and people have these expectations. So I ordered something online from a vendor I had never ordered before, right? And Amazon, I always get an email right away. Here's the tracking number. Here's the order number, and I'm like, all right, good, it's gone through. This one vendor was a smaller vendor that I ordered it. I didn't get a single thing, right? I got a confirmation page. I didn't get a single email. I didn't get a tracking number. And right away, I started to doubt myself, right? Did I hit submit? Did they charge my credit card? Am I actually going to get this delivery? Eventually, I think like about a day and a half later, I actually got something. So yeah, setting those expectations is pretty important, and that's going to make everybody's life easier, right? And if kind of the whole point of this is to be able to scale the services without people having to phone or come into the office, yeah, if you set that expectation and you're going to get a certain time, it's going to help.
Okay, so now we're going to flip it. That sort of, we talked about what the municipality should prioritize for the resident. So on the other side, what is important for the municipality to make seamless for them, for themselves to administer, and including on the payment side here?
Yeah, I can kick that off. I think the first thing I would say is getting it all in one system. Like technology has advanced a lot, and the capability of kind of running an entire service online, like fully, is there now. And that makes it a lot easier for municipalities, because when you have to go into administer something, look at responses, move something forward in a workflow, it's all in one system. It's all managed there online. And that makes it just way easier for your staff to oversee a process. And then they're not spending a lot of time trying to like reconcile a paper version with what they have online and then sending an email. Like you can have systems built out that kind of automate that whole process. So to me, that always resonates, because then it makes it easier. And it's even easier when you collect the payment online, because all of a sudden you can now run an export. All of your financials come out automatically. It's deposited into the right account. Just huge cost savings and efficiency there. That also just improves everybody's quality of life, because then they can work on other tasks that provide a lot of value to residents and to the government. So yeah, that's kind of what speaks out to me. Daniel, you muted yourself.
Had to happen once in the webinar, right?
Yeah, and it had to be me, right? It had to be me, of course. So yeah, I was just agreeing with everything that Michael just said there, but also just in terms to make it seamless, like this is the right spot, but work with partners and take the time to find the right partners that are going to be helping you with those transactions, right? So whether it's going to, and again, I'll just give municipal examples. That's what I'm most comfortable with. But whether it's going to be somebody that wants to be able to register for a program, making sure that making some kind of a payment online through like a forms tool, right? So if this is going to be something new to people, just make sure that you're asking the right questions. You're trying the product. If you're going to be buying some kind of a third-party tool, take it for a test drive, look at different solutions, because you don't want to find out after the fact that it might not be meeting your needs. Just if you're going to be using some kind of partner, obviously for payments, we got Worldline on the call, but whatever that solution is going to be, make sure it's working.
Yeah, and just to touch on sorry, Meredith,
no, go for it.
We touched on it a bit at the beginning there, talking about the scalability. That's also one of the big important factors for municipalities to be able to scale up their services to be able to offer that to their citizens.
Yeah, I want to touch on that as well, quick. I think with scalability, in modern tools, you should be looking for easy configuration, right? It should be quick for your staff to set up a solution end to end in a product that can process payments, collect data, hold the data, allow you to administer the data. That should all exist in one ecosystem and location, right? And then, it makes it convenient on both sides, right? And seamless, where it's seamless to implement and then also seamless to administer after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So now I've got a question for Kevin. So we've talked about, the ideal scenarios on either side. And obviously as part of this, we're talking about we're talking about payment infrastructures. What does that actually mean for a municipality? Like, what does a modern payment infrastructure actually mean?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So a modern payment infrastructure essentially means that the customer experience has them staying on the merchant's website. They're not being taken off to another link or another payment page somewhere else. It's all in one spot where they're able to add their card, save their card, so for future payments, so they're not having to enter it every single time they're needing to purchase, just like Amazon. They've got all your details saved, so you don't have to keep entering it every time. Other things like being bank agnostic and being able to process payments through different methods as well. We have flexible payment options, so depending on the partner's needs, there's different levels of integration effort to integrate with our platform. So there's like no code where you're just integrating with our simple hosted page. There's a low code where you're integrating with a customized hosted page or a simple payment processing through our modern APIs. And then there's full integrations where your integration takes advantage of our processing, our risk tools, reporting, settlement tracking, etc. So some of those things are for sure necessities of a modern payment infrastructure today. And also things like real-time reporting, so real-time transaction reporting, and having the ability also to export historical reports so you can reconcile and that there's just better analysis end to end of that entire pipeline.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So we've talked about the micro, the macro. We've talked about the fraud element. We've talked about like what we believe residents want, the benefits to them, benefits to the municipality. So what happens when this all comes together? Like, what is the holy grail here, right? What can that look like?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll take that one.
Yeah, no, I could jump in, so I think it is kind of what we've talked a little bit about, of kind of just having that end-to-end experience, right? So that never having to really kind of only go halfway, we'll say, right? So if it's going to be kind of some kind of transaction that has a workflow, that whole workflow works online, right? So an example would be somebody's applying for a burn permit, but there's an issue with the burn permit, but now somebody has to come in. Well, no, let's try to bring that whole experience online so it can all be handled through email or whatever it's going to be. And then that next piece would be, okay, something's being approved. Now we want to pay for it online, right? So I think it is truly having that end to end. And, you know, it's a lot of the stuff, it's probably not as hard as people think to get to that, to be honest. I mean, some processes might be more difficult than others. And that is something I find, like, so I'm fortunate enough to talk to a lot of our clients. And I think there's a bit of an intimidation factor, right, on doing that, right? Like, but you know, there's a lot of different solutions out there that are able to get you there pretty quickly. So, you know, don't be intimidated by kind of taking that huge step. So it might be, you know, the starting point, kind of things we've talked about of, you know, bringing that paper-based form online, right? So that's step one. The next one would be, okay, well, now we need to change our internal processes to try to get some kind of workflow because we brought it online. Yeah, that takes a little bit of time, but you'll figure it out. And then that final piece is the payment, right? And I feel like that's, I mean, I'd be curious on Carlos and Kevin's thoughts. I find like that's where people get the most intimidated, is that, you know, who do we work with? What about the security side? So that holy grail is the term you use there, Meredith, is like bringing it from start to finish so that the resident feels like they've got that complete experience. Yeah, like right from the start to the finish.
Awesome. So does anybody have a success story or an example of that? So just in terms of, you know, or a scenario where, you know, we've brought integrated we've brought integrated payments and workflows, you know, together that have made or could make a measurable impact for, you know, for the municipality and their citizens. I believe, Kevin, you had, yeah.
Yeah, we actually did have a success story. We had a partner that was working with a nonprofit organization, which was looking to solution payment acceptance that would allow their members and sponsors to provide their card details securely for the execution of their member due and event attendance invoices. They needed a payments platform that, along with, you know, strong security, also provided the customers the option to pay with their preferred payment type in a seamless, hassle-free experience. For this specific challenge, we proposed integrating with Worldline's custom checkout as a solution, as it addressed all three of their key requirements. They had security, multiple payment type support, and custom and hassle-free integration. Those were their three main requirements. And like I said, the result was to integrate with our custom checkout product. And it was a surefire way to please their members with the increased security and payment flexibility. The form itself, it's completely customizable, allowing the merchant to use its brand and retain complete control over that user experience. And then this allowed them to eliminate the potential for the insecure transfer of the credit card information by email and reduce their administrative time taking card information over the phone. So they were happy with that final solution, and they were pleased with the support that they received along the way. So definitely a success story there.
Yeah, I've got another success story I can share. So worked with a few of our clients to kind of implement marriage licenses online. So and that kind of end-to-end handles the whole process. So first you kind of submit out your application with kind of your rough dates. It collects all the information that you need in order to process the finalized document. It's all collected online, and then it can go into kind of a status where it waits until the marriage actually happened, because that's usually after you apply for your license, right? And then once it happens, you can update the status in our tool to match the status of the application. So when they're ready to come in and collect it, it automatically takes the data the user filled out and prints it onto the legal document that they get from the provincial government. And what that ends up doing is it removes any overhead. Your clerks don't need to transfer the data into another system or manually fill out a PDF and then print it. The form just does it automatically all online at the click of a button. And any supplemental information, they're able to collect that too after the fact, right, to finalize processing. So it really allows them to offer marriage licenses in a much more convenient way, where it's one trip to the municipality to pick up your license. And that's the only time you really need to go in person, because the rest of it can be handled online.
Yeah, and I'll throw it out. They're kind of similar to Michael's, but that is like that's what you just mentioned there. I feel like that is kind of like that end to end. So my example would be something similar in terms of kind of applying for something, but it does kind of take it to the next level. And what we've had a client that is doing this with their pet licenses, right? So I said earlier that the Holy Grail is taken all the way to through to payment, but what I'm going to describe is maybe like the Holy Grail. It's like taking even one step further is yes, allowing people to apply for something online. In this example, it's going to be for pet licensing. It's going to give people the ability to do that. It also gave them the ability to renew for those pet licenses, right? So there's that piece. And I was actually maybe when I'm done here, maybe some feedback from Kevin on, because you had mentioned reoccurring payments. So not sure how that would play into all of this. But then they took it even a step further where they had the payment, but then they also did some integrations, right? So we haven't really even touched on that. Is like, how can you create that extra level of efficiencies in integrating with your third-party systems, right? So let's say you've got a forms tool. We obviously have our GovStack forms tool, which is able to facilitate payments and allow people to apply for permits online. But ultimately, a lot of our clients, that has to go into some kind of a third-party tool like an ERP. So this client in particular, they were pulling in addresses from their GIS system to display on the form, and then they were pushing all this pet licensing data right back into their ERP, right, as opposed to having to enter it again manually. So that particular client, like the time that would save them, right? So just even that example of pulling in. So when somebody's filling out the form and they have to input their address, people put it in different ways. They spell their street name wrong or whatever it might be. And that creates a whole challenge and issue, right? So what did we do with them? Had we worked together, we pulled in all the addresses from their GIS into a form, and then the person can just select it, right? So efficiency number one. Then that client, they would have had to go and re-enter it into their ERP because that's where they store all their pet licenses. Well, there's an opportunity to an integration, right? And I'm talking about our GovStack Forms tool. That's what I'm most familiar with, but lots of different tools are going to allow you to do this. Push that back into that ERP. So now you just save somebody entering that against. That one particular client, I mean, they I don't know how much they saved on each form, probably, hundreds of hours throughout the year, I'm sure.
Yeah, and to touch on your piece about that recurring payments, for sure, any modern payment infrastructure today should have the ability to, set a schedule for future payments and have that be, whether it's a monthly or biweekly, to charge a card and then let them know, if this is the future schedule of payments, this is the history of payments, here's what to expect. And then the ability to also do this through credit card or through, EFT, straight through a bank-to-bank transaction. So to be able to schedule those for recurring payments, I think is a big win. So there's not that, they don't have to have that mental note, they'll have to pay this bill, It's already set there for them.
Oh, I love that. I am one of those people. If it is not set on a reoccurring payment, all of a sudden I start getting those emails saying, hello, it's time for you to pay us. Yeah, if I could do that with my municipalities too, that'd be great. So I have one last question, and then there's a few questions that have come in that I will then start to ask you. So if anybody does have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. Okay, so I've got maybe some basic forms or none at all, or I want to start implementing the workflow stuff in the background to help save time. Oh, where do I start? So, not necessarily from a product perspective or whatnot, but just where should I identify the areas of improvement? What are the best steps to getting started on what I should focus on first?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that.
Sure.
Kind of the way I would start out is figure out where you're at in your journey. Like if it's your first form that you want to make digital, try to start with something like easy, ideally that's not complicated, maybe the user submits something, collects payment or doesn't, and then you send a notification it's completed to your team and to the citizen. That's a great place to start. And, if you have lots of, PDF forms where users are just simply submitting data in or applying for something, those can be really good places to start. And then I would layer on, once you kind of have your workflow down for those simple forms. I guess I should mention it's important to select the right tool. So when you're doing your testing, look at your workflows, and then once you have a good tool that will let you build out everything you need, then kind of proceed forward with that tool. And then once you kind of have a few forms live running well, put feedback links on those forms, see if it's working for residents, if it isn't, so that you can get a pulse on how they're using them, how adoption is. Another key piece is actually make it known. So advertise it on your website and stuff like that, that you're offering services online, and make sure that people can find those via Google and things like that, so they can actually find the service online. Because if they're used to coming in person, you're going to need to overcome that hill. And then once you've got people kind of coming online, using your forms, you have basic forms and payments online, that's when I think, again, start with an easier workflow, one that's not quite as complex. Set up your approvers, work internally to make sure kind of your departments align, and then go live with it. And if it's working, awesome. And then if it isn't, not a big deal. You just adjust and kind of find where this, the squeaky wheel is, apply a little grease there, whether that's the workflow or the payment integration, right? And then you should be able to go forward and then build out more and more complex as you kind of grow your online service delivery platform.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like I mentioned it earlier, I think a lot of people are just intimidated to even start the process. They don't know where to start. I think, and it could be a big change for certain things, but a lot of things that might not that be big a change, and it's going to be positive. So you're right, Michael. Like, start small and just kind of dip your toe in there and give it a shot, right? And then the other thing with that is, people already have a process in place for doing certain things, right? So, and maybe use that process, kind of what you're doing is like a more of a traditional process, and then just kind of think of a way we can bring that online, right? So it's not always about reinventing the wheel, starting from scratch. Just kind of think about how you're doing it now, and again, that might be working for you kind of from a workflow standpoint, as like, how can we bring that online, right? So just again, don't bite off a little bit, don't be intimidated by it. Just go for it, I think.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I want that as well.
Go for it.
It's one of those things where it's going to seem really intimidating if you start, especially if you're swamped processing a lot of applications, right? But if you can take the time to chip away, build an online form, which is a lot quicker now than it used to be, you're going to be able to then start saving time as those services and processes online. It's easier to move things forward. And so it might feel intimidating, but once you kind of get the machine going and you get the online submission started, you'll notice time savings coming in after the fact.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. So one of the first questions that came in earlier was, and this is probably a question for Kevin and Carlos. So what are some payment solution examples that have been implemented with effective risk management?
I mean, Kevin, do you want to take this one? And I built on it with some tools?
Sure, yeah. So some payment solution examples that are implemented that have that effective risk management would be integrations that have things like 3D Secure, which is an additional step for a customer to go through in case there's a challenge from their bank. They're not sure who that transaction is actually being processed by. So that's probably one of the biggest examples that I could use as far as preventing or having that effective risk management for your transaction flows. Also, in addition to that, just being on top of your transactions, being able to set up, some platforms have the ability to set up, specific thresholds for any type of risk on a risk score that comes back on a transaction. So if their appetite for risk is a little bit more than others, then they're fine to take those transactions, whereas others, they can just be warned about them. And so just being on top of your transactions as well, or at least setting it up so you're notified, so you're on top of those transactions. That's probably some of the best examples of just effective risk management for your transaction processing flow.
To build in on this one a little bit, though, just basically 3D Secure is the common known as Visa secure code, sorry, MasterCard secure code and verified by Visa. So you get an extra step after your payment where you like input a password or a code that is sent to your phone, or a previous password that you set up. That adds extra layer of security and shift the liability to the bank and prevent chargeback. So it's a really good tool for merchants to have, especially for large payments. The other thing which Kevin was mentioning is risk threshold. So there's tools that provide a scoring on the transaction, and it helps you prevent the credential stuffing or carding that we talked about before. So these features are really important. If you can have them, I will suggest to put them in place.
Carlos, another question, and I'm hoping that you might be able to answer this one. So obviously a lot of municipalities have insurance as it relates to cyber and to risk. And so if they are starting to take payments online, and I know you're not an insurance specialist, so I will put that caveat out there. But is there, anything from your point of view that you can offer as advice for them as it relates to their insurance or what they need to do?
Yes, you need to notify your insurance about it. It does affect your insurance policy. I will not know exactly how much, but it does increase exposure on cyber risks and data breaches. So normal policies don't cover that. So you will need to let know your insurance broker about it, or who handles the policy, to include this part of in the insurance policy.
Thank you.
Go
for it, Kevin.
Just to add to that, I just wanted to add, so with a modern payment system, you can be ensured that having your integration use like an embedded form will allow your integration to remain compliant with any type of PCI DSS or FinTrack compliancy or regulatory compliance issues. So again, this is going to help security for all parties involved, as well as privacy of those transactions.
So everybody talks about accessibility, and we did have a question come in around accessibility. So the first part of this being, are the digital payment options that are available in partnership with GovStack and GovStack Forms accessible? So Worldline. Since you are a partner with that, so how does, from an accessibility point of view, can you answer that?
Yeah, I believe our forms, our custom checkout or our checkout forms definitely are up on the regulatory. I remember there was an effort not too far back where everything was brought up to the current regulation standards. So yeah, if you're using our forms, you're embedding our forms into your product, into that GovStack product, then absolutely it's going to be compliant. Not to worry there.
Yeah, I just want to touch on that as well.
Please.
The tools that you're going to use are compliant, but I want to stress that it's still really important to build your form in a way that's accessible. So, that means using clear title labels, clear error messages, and things like that, and structuring your form in a way that makes sense. So like, don't have it where a user would jump around for different sections and things like that. Group them together so it kind of makes sense as you're filling it out. Because accessibility is more than just like ticking a box. It goes into how you design and build these things. And as long as you're, building it out, clearly labeling things, having a simple flow, ordering things logically, you should tick all the boxes and be good to go.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the last question, and I know I honestly don't know the answer to this one. So just in terms of, this is more on the GovStack product side. Obviously a lot of confidential potential information comes in. Is there ways to, in the data side of it, is there ways that only certain people can access certain information in the back end?
Yeah, so the first thing for this is setting up proper roles and permissions. That's going to govern who can see what. So, if you have users who aren't supposed to see, responses collected at a certain area of the product, don't apply your permissions at the root, apply folder level permissions, apply them in groups. And that's going to reduce your risk because then you won't have everyone seeing everything. So that's like an important first step. And then right now, the best way I would say to kind of manage super sensitive information is to build an integration and have it actually moved out of our product into your internal system, and then grant your treasury staff access to that system and make sure your administrators can't see it. And this can all happen automatically via API once the response is submitted. So that way you're reducing your risk, you're only storing it in your own environment. And that's kind of like, I would say, the best practice way to achieve what you're looking to get out of it.
Thank you, Michael. That would be all of the questions that have come in. So is there any last words from Kevin, Michael, Daniel, or Carlos?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just reiterate whatever I've said it a few times. Is just that, kind of, jump in the water's fine type of thing, right? So I know we've got some existing clients on the call, so please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll kind of we can get you started on that journey. Happy to have that conversation, or if it's with some other type of solution that you might be trying to procure. Yeah, just it's again, it is that expectation now. And I think we were all going to agree on that one. So yeah, just get the journey started. It's the sooner the better.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all for the time and listening to us. And like Daniel said, don't hesitate to reach out if you've got questions or you want to kind of understand how to tackle this.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, go for it, Kevin.
I was just going to say thank you as well. And then on the Worldline side, if there's, if anyone wants to, sign up for access to our sandbox or anything like that, by all means, you can do that through our developer portal. But yeah, thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, and thank you for everybody who attended. And thank you to our partners from Worldline, Kevin and Carlos, and of course, to Michael and Daniel. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you to everybody who attended. Hope that you did get some answers to your questions, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.